Almost complete. Herzlich willkommen. Welcome to the public online space of the Architekturzentrum Wien, the Austrian Architecture Museum in Vienna. This event tonight is to accompany our current exhibition, Land for Us All. It's curated by Caroline Meyer and Katharina Ritter, and Caroline will also chair the event tonight. The exhibition Land for Us All is a broad investigation on land use, policies, capitalism, speculation, climate change, and many more related topics. And many of the findings in this exhibition could make you cry or at least shout out loud. And this is why it's really important to also show that a better way of spatial planning and land use is possible. And that's what you also see in our exhibition, and that's what we're going to see tonight. And to learn about it, the title of the panel discussion tonight is There is Another Way. And we have fantastic guests from all over the world who will present and discuss their projects and strategies with us. Caroline will introduce them in a minute. And so from my part, I just would like to say thank you to all of you, to our distinguished guests, and thank you to everyone at home listening and joining and hopefully also asking questions tonight. And I would like to invite you to visit our exhibition again. We are open again since this week, and also get our excellent catalog where you will also find all the projects we are discussing tonight. And yeah, I really hope you will find a lot of inspiration from tonight. And at this point, I hand over to Caroline. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Angelika. Welcome and good evening to tonight's event. And also for the people who are not in Vienna and can't come to see our exhibition there, I have good news. Because we are making a second version of the exhibition, which will then travel through Austria for the next 2 years and perhaps even come to a place close to you. And I'm quite happy to announce that the first stop is in fact already opening next week on Tuesday, the 11th of May in Leibniz in Styria. As Angelika said, that in the exhibition we talk a lot about the mechanisms that contribute to the escalating use of land and soil, be they related to planning, finance, or politics, which are beginning to threaten our climate, our food security, our cities, our public spaces, equality in society, etc. We talk about the multitude of problems and conflicts of interest in land use policy, which might make the situation seem quite hopeless. But a very important part of the exhibition concerns itself with best practice projects and examples from all over the world that show the visitors that it is possible to find a positive way and new approaches in dealing with land. In the exhibition, this is called, the chapter is called Putting Good Things on the Ground. And these projects shown there, they do really give reason for hope. There are 16 selected local and international projects that show that spatial and urban development does not have to surrender to the dictate of capital and exploitation of resources and labor. They all demonstrate that with initiative and courage, change is possible from below as well as from above. The issue of land is present in its ecological, economic, and social dimensions. And the chosen projects illustrate that there is another way. For today's event, we want to be a stage for this chapter. We have selected 4 projects from the exhibition that represent very different approaches to land as a resource. We have asked people involved to present these projects and the processes that lead to their realization. We have 4 guests from all over the world. We will have 4 short presentations of 10 minutes each. And after that, we will have the opportunity to talk and also to answer questions to the audience. That brings me to a practical issue. If you have questions already during the 4 presentations, please just write them into the chat and I will keep an eye on the chat, and I'll be able to read them out after the presentations. So I will present the guests one after the other. So our first guest will be Vedrana Zalac from the Wohngenossenschaft Zimmerfrei in Basel, in Switzerland. She will talk about the housing project, or the project Stadtentwicklung in the Erlenmatt Ost quarter in Basel. She studied landscape architecture at the university in Zagreb, followed by postgraduate studies in Germany and Switzerland. Her master's thesis was about the process-oriented design methodology for public spaces in the urban context. Between 2009 and 2019, she worked at Fontana Landschaftsarchitektur based in Basel. She co-founded the housing cooperative Zimmerfrei in Basel and is member of its board. Between 2013 and 2017, she worked on the project Stadtentwicklung that she's going to present today, and especially in the organization of the collective planning process and the communication involved with it. Since 2019, she's working for Denkstadt Saal in project and process development. I will briefly talk about the Erlenmatt Ostquartier, which is actually, so the Stadtentwicklung is one of the buildings that are part of the Erlenmatt Ostquartier. And really the entire Erlenmatt Ostquartier is part of our exhibition. Because the interesting thing about it is that it was developed by the Basel-based Stiftung Habitat, whose objective is, amongst others, to ensure an affordable city for everyone by withdrawing land from the free market, where land and housing rapidly are being turned into a commodity, or even further than that, a financial product that leads to an upward spiraling cost of housing for everybody. And in Erlenmatt Ost, it does so by utilizing the legal instrument of the heritable building right, where the land is not sold, but only the right to build upon that land is granted, which is a very interesting instrument that we are featuring in the exhibition. The foundation started with individual building scale projects, but made a jump in scale as they entered the business of neighborhood development with the Erlenmatt Ostquartier. And that is a new urban area situated on the site of the former Deutsche Bahn freight station in the north of Basel. It consists of two parts, connected by a path, and the eastern part was acquired by the foundation and divided into 13 smaller plots, 4 of which the foundation is developing or developed themselves. While other initiatives interested in the heritable building rights were sought for the other 9 sites. And among them were a sustainable pension fund, housing associations, cooperatives, including 2 startup cooperatives. And one of those startup cooperatives is the Wohngenossenschaft Zimmerfrei. And Vedrana, I would like to ask you to present the project, which we're very curious about.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and I can talk about, we can see then something what you just mentioned. So yeah, as you mentioned, I will talk today about this little building on the Erlenmatt Ostquartier and the process that led to it. This is what you just described. There is a picture of it. I think this is about probably 10 years old or a bit older. It is the freight station, well, already partly developed area of former German railways. That was at that time then, after it was free in the end of the 90s, was sold to, or well, was first there was a cooperation between the German railways and the city of Basel. They did a few architectural competition on the urban scale, thinking to be able to see which plots will come out. And after that, they were selling a lot of plots. The city of Basel was at that time not so far to buy the plots themselves. They changed their policy in the meantime. And here we can see in the picture where this old silo building is. That is the area of the eastern area that was for a long time not finding an investor because it is a bit difficult to develop. As you can see in the background is a highway. I think this is one of the most frequented highway sections in Europe, because it takes all the traffic coming from Northern Europe to Southern Europe. So it needed also a special way of how you're developing this. The foundation called Habitat then came into the game, and they really bought this whole part, and then made a second step with Atelier 5, that is an architectural office from Bern, and developed further the cities, the scheme that was there in the competition. I will show this now in the next slide. As you can see, the western part, and so there are pretty big building blocks. They were bought by investors and developed, and the eastern part shows a bit different structure. So what Habitat did, they basically realized that if they want to give chance to a smaller initiatives, they need to a bit cut these big volumes of buildings. At that time we came into the game, we were just a group of friends who started to settle in the city of Basel. Most of us, actually, I think all of us who were there in the beginning are not from Basel. And we had the idea that we would want to live collectively and stay in the city. I think the first dream was to find like a plot or an old house that we could renovate for no money if possible. And of course, this dream very soon became a reality, where already at that time, like that is almost 8 years ago, it was a mission impossible to find something like that. The foundation was at that time so far that they had the plots and they were looking for partners. We applied with a concept, and we were a bit surprised, but positively surprised, that we got a building block 9, that is blue in the picture. And at that time we started a cooperative after through sleepless nights, because suddenly our project and our idea scaled. We were not anymore 6 people, but we realized that now we have a project that has to take 100 people. How to do that? That's just an image of the group. In Switzerland, you can find a cooperative with 8 people. So this is the day when we found it and when it all started. After that, it was clear for us that we are definitely not the only the representative group that wants to realize such a project, and that we want to open ourselves to the idea that are at the time interesting or are open, like that are in the city. So we organized this collective project development process, where we made a participation process that was open throughout the whole planning and building process. That meant series of workshops. Later on, we called it eco rooms or excursion, and we shared ideas about sustainable individual living and also living together. The first goal was to create a program for architectural competition. And here I just want to show just some topics that we were discussing. The house already had a name then. We called it the Stadtentwicklung, that's like a city earl translated. And it was very clear from the broader group that was participating that it needs to be, Stadtentwicklung needs to be mixed. There it has to be space for different generational, cultural backgrounds or life plans. How to be modest. That was a topic at that time where we went for the idea that we want a limited individual space, and we created occupancy requirements that is visible in the scheme down there. So you can only rent, you have to be a certain amount of persons to live in a certain flat. Flexibility was a big topic, because to have a socially sustainable house, for us, it was important that you can stay in this house in different phases of your life. So there was a big topic about how can we achieve that? Do we need to work with this architecturally, that we have apartments that can get smaller and bigger, or do we go for it in an organizational way? We went for the second, and we therefore created a very broad range of flats, or we ordered them later on, from studio to 6.5 room flats. And we also have 2 shared apartments, 12.5 room, and a cluster flat that is 16 room, joking rooms and other community rooms. And yeah, how to have it not too expensive, that we can still get as many people as possible inside that have different possibilities or financial possibilities. And there again, the topic was about flat sizes. Let's reduce them, then the rent is smaller, and let's try to work with building standards, having a modest standard that I already mentioned, but also a certain uniformity so that we can get lower prices. Yeah, all that I mentioned previously doesn't sound like much fun. There is a lot of reducing and not so much surface. You have to be a lot of people. You're not allowed to do this and that. So we were thinking, okay, it has to be somehow attractive for us. Why would we want to live there? And there we talked about the concept more through sharing, where we really discussed which rooms and which activities in the house are the ones that we would like to have, but we don't necessarily need to own these spaces alone, but we can share them. So that's how it came, this whole topics of communal laundry, workshop, guest room, and lobby that is actually our living room and a kitchen that has a bit bigger size, and you can actually have a birthday there and invite 30 people. That's just a layout of the project that won then the competition that we made. It is a project from Buchner Bründler Architects, and they made a really poetic proposal and quote us already with the title "Good Morning on the Veranda." That is basically pretty much very crucial element of the house. They were the only one who proposed that. What we liked is the modular way of how they thought flats. So all of them have the same quality. They have both sides. They're oriented west and east, no matter the size, and connected through this veranda. They said that veranda they understood that this is exactly the social place that we are looking for. We said that we want a house where social context will just happen, where you don't need to look for your neighbors, but you can just occasionally meet them, and some things can just emerge without planning them. Another thing what we really liked was the position of this central room, the living room and the kitchen, that we somehow wanted to be there for everybody, and they put that really in the heart of the building, in the ground floor, and it's the place where nobody who comes home goes by without seeing it. Yeah, just a few images of how the architects then had to go through the process with us. They were on the table and they had to present the project in echo rooms. And yeah, sorry. I will just go through it. We could comment on that. I mean, it was a very interesting and intensive thing. And of course, when you work like that, you need to use also other methods. These are the models that the architects built of different apartments that we can understand them and furnish them. We did building side. We were visiting the building site, but also talked about the organization. So already before the building was there, we already talked about how do we want to organize those common rooms, and how are the structure going to look like, who's deciding what, and who is taking care of the coffee machine. Here, I will just go very fastly through some images to give you a bit of an impression of how it looks like. I think they don't need so much comment. Those are the verandas that we have on each floor that are furnished and are differently used. That's the one impression of the central living room that takes really different function. It can get pretty wild and messy. But yeah, we have rules how to clean it up. And this is like an impression of the apartments. That's like one module that we saw previously in the plan, how most of the flats look like, and the bigger flats that are in the corner have a bit different layout. Yeah, and this is the roof terrace. And that's how it looks now. And we are here in the middle and have also cool neighbors. And I'm finished, sorry.
Absolute perfect timing. Thank you, Vedrana. It was a very nice little tour through the project, which I was very happy to see during the summer, when it was actually possible to leave the country for there was a window of 2 weeks where it seemed to be possible to travel. Yes, thank you so much. So I will continue going with the lectures, because we'll have the opportunity to talk about the lectures afterwards, about the different projects. The next presentation will be held by Christopher de Vries from Rademacher de Vries Architects in Amsterdam. Rademacher de Vries is a design and research office that focuses on architecture, the city, and the urban environment. In their research-driven approach, they investigate projects through the perspective of different scales, cultural transformations, and technological innovations, aiming to overcome disciplinary boundaries and actively engage in societal challenges. Christopher de Vries, he graduated as an architect at the MIT in 2011, and before that did his bachelor degree at Delft University. During his studies, he worked for West 8 and Jo Koenen Architects, and in the US, he was part of the Harvard GSD New Geographies Lab. He later worked at OPSIS Landscape Infrastructure. During his studies, he founded 2 research groups that examined contemporary issues of urbanization, urban emergencies, and the European Infrastructure Lab. Between 2012 and 2014, he worked at ZUS in Rotterdam, after which he taught at the Delft University of Technology, and in 2018 started as a research fellow at Future Urban Regions. He will today show us the project, the renaturation of the ENCI quarry industrial site, and we've chosen that for our exhibition as we see it as a very successful example of the fact that we can also return land to nature and let ecological processes take over and trust or help create a unique environment where human and natural developments thrive alongside. The architect's office was responsible for the master plan, was involved in the first phase of renaturation as well as in the planning of the next phase. Christopher, we're very curious to hear more about the project. The screen is yours.
Okay, so I'll share it here. Thank you, first of all, for that introduction, and also for inviting us. This works now? You see it? Yes? Oh, okay, excellent. So first, I mean, a lot of our images in the slides, so I'll go through it quite quickly. I think I have a few too many slides, but I think I'll just start with kind of the larger scale. And when you look at mines in Europe, there might actually be many more than you actually think of. But mines obviously have very different natures. And in our case, it is a mine that looks specifically at sandstone, limestone, which is used for concrete, which is actually not so much present in the Netherlands. As a matter of fact, there's only one very little part in the south where it is, and that's why NC also stands for First Dutch Concrete Mine. Even though it was never Dutch, it wasn't the first. And then initially, because it was Swiss, there was actually first another industry there, and then ultimately it was bought by the Germans. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about it, but it was one little part in the south. If you see, I don't have an arrow in this presentation, no? Anyhow, the Netherlands is predominantly mud. So not so much to make concrete out of. Here you see in the south, kind of some geographical mappings where it would actually be good to have a pointer. Is there an opportunity to have a...
Lena, is that possible? To
maybe you use your
the mouse?
Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, it's in the right bottom is the site, and yeah, this was an analysis of where this material actually is in the Netherlands, and the southern, actually in the left of the site you see the site. But I'll go first. The point is, it's covered underneath 10 meters, 20 meters of topsoil. And initially, when you see the yellow slab in the middle here, It was also kind of a geology that's even named after the city that it's in, Maastrichtien, which is unique. Most of them are kind of named after people or have Latin names of various things. But the Maastrichtien formation was named after the excavation, which first of all happened underground and was actually a kind of a labor-intensive way of cutting out blocks, which was done kind of artisanally. And created this kind of whole underground world of patterns, textures, and building materials that almost when you go there now is kind of half visible. By the open pit mining has this kind of Egyptian quality to it, which is full of also architectural and art artifacts from old, hidden in the Second World War. All of the Dutch kind of archives were hidden here. There were there's all of these tours underground, which kind of reveal the kind of the craziest things that happened underground. Napoleon was here, etc. And then obviously this also had its kind of its form in the city. They were excavated from the mountain and then were built literally. So there's this very close connection to the city and this form of mining. So it kind of the city and the mine kind of had a very kind of coexistence, which was always kind of productive. Underground, these labyrinthine kind of environments were created, which also today now have kind of a touristic function. And at the same time, it's a site of important geological findings. So here you see kind of the bottom of an old Jurassic ocean, which also, the Mosasaurus, which also featured in the latest Jurassic Park, if I'm not wrong, was also found here and gave the place a lot of renown, not only for kind of like its spatial aspects, but also for its like geologists and paleontologists from all over the world came to this site to look at it. And then actually in the last century, this is a wrong date, but the open pit mining started with explosions, large excavators. And essentially started revealing a whole different landscape. And I think one of the interesting aspects is that also as this process happened, the adjacent, this large kind of industrial landscape emerged. But unlike many industrial landscapes, here you kind of see how close it is to the city. And because of that, there's always kind of been felt as a kind of a temporal kind of that they were borrowing the land from the city in order to produce this kind of evidently useful product, which also the post-war era, the concessions for this mine were given in the kind of rebuilding effort after World War II. And so there was always this kind of understanding, but obviously emissions, they grew in concerns about the actual total demolition of the mountain. Currently, the whole mountain is actually almost gone and only has this kind of fringe of elevation that actually shows a facade in front of a hollowed out mountain. But everybody also started seeing that as soon as you don't touch it after the excavation, because it's unlike toxic forms of mining, when you stop mining, you blink your eyes and this whole kind of ecology starts emerging, which is actually much more interesting than the ecology that was there before because of the very scarce tops of undersoil. Very specific types of plants and ecologies emerge here. So people immediately started understanding that even though it is an exploitation landscape, there were all of these kind of more nuanced and more interesting forms of kind of coexistence that weren't per se so negative than the normal relationship we have with industry. And because of this, there are also in the last years, so actually my partner David and I, we played soccer on top of this mountain in the middle and in the bush that was our former soccer fields, and we would always, as kids, climb into here and kind of illegally explore the new landscape, etc. But through that also kind of understood like firsthand the kind of the quality that it had. And at this point in time, we were architect students, and we essentially started sending in these images that we were making to the newspapers and saying, hey, the discussion about whether this industry should leave or close or start emitting CO2, etc. That's actually not the interesting discussion. We should start talking about how are they excavating it, and can they excavate it in a certain way so that it ultimately creates this legacy landscape that in the kind of a post cement kind of era will be super valuable. And based on that, we kind of naively made those proposals and sent them around, but they immediately got a lot of resonance, and this kind of political process started, through which we were kind of constantly, because we were too young, kind of cut out, and then they would invite more senior architects, and then we kind of constantly wrestled our way back into the process. And also because we're from there, we were able to also lead this kind of community effort, which was also always against the factory, but to kind of get them in a coalition. And at this point, like these top logos are essentially the partners, but the provincial government, the city government, one of the Dutch's largest natural conservancy groups. And they formed actually a contractual obligation that the industry was allowed to excavate for 10 more years, but based on this plan that we made, and then on certain restrictions. And everybody was a signature. So also the neighborhood became a legal signature of that document, which is very rare. Usually they can participate and say, but here they're actually legally part of the contract. And actually since then, we've been working on all of these projects with them, from swimming places to more the kind of ecological planning on the left side, to more recently the transformation of the industrial site. And I mean, when you walk around there, even like the pictures don't really do it justice, even though they are nice as well. When you're there, you kind of, specifically for the Netherlands, any form of elevation is rare. And then when it has this kind of extremities and these poetic, the color is turquoise blue. Every time you kind of look at an edge, it's kind of full of geological history. The vegetation is for Dutch norms extremely rare. But all of these shapes that you see, at a certain point, we were just kind of telling the excavators, go left or right, we'd sketch out things, and they would start digging in these forms because they didn't care. Usually when you do these projects, it is extremely costly, but in this case, it was actually, if we would make a deeper hole, they would be super happy because they got more concrete. So it was this kind of give and take, together with the Natural Conservancy group, talking about what is an interesting section, when is it good for ecology, and when is the water too deep and actually has no function, how should we let water flow over certain surfaces to create various types of ecology, etc. So it was this really interesting collaboration between predominantly the Nature Conservancy group, but also the neighborhood, about like what do you want to do in this place in the future, even though it's predominantly will be nature. So like these are these kind of weird obelisks at a certain point that came out of one of these sessions, and then they just remained, which now are quite magnificent when you walk among them. Then this is the viewpoint. The whole quarry was always surrounded by trees, which is actually rare, because previously, before the quarry was there, was all agricultural land. So these trees were explicitly planted so you wouldn't see the quarry. So the kind of puncturing through the woodland and then having this first viewpoint was actually the first project to start making the quarry public again. This is exactly the place where we used to break into the site, so we knew it was a good access point. But then constructing it, so this is was also we kind of really found out the kind of technical difficulties of building on site. This is, by the way, an image of the more mature nature on site, which looks almost already, which is from the 70s. And actually, what the stairs do is kind of they very delicately, so that the stops in between are all lined out with geological moments in history. So when you walk over the stairs, each break, which obviously is legally necessary, but at the same time, we kind of line them out with the geological history, so that every time that you stop, there's also very subtly information, and also in the concrete, there's various stones poured in so that the aggregates refer to the geological layers. So it's kind of this kind of geological experience, and at the same time, it's not an attraction. So it's kind of subtly done so that it doesn't become a Disney park. It is underneath the site. It's full of these manually excavated things, which also made it a certain kind of like a death trap. All these things are super unstable. So we had to use extremely advanced point cloud and geological analyses to ultimately kind of position the thing on the only actually remaining stable stone, whereas if it would have gone a little more to the left, it was not safe, etc. So it almost kind of formed based on the analysis, the shape kind of emerged. Then secondly, the whole thing is below water level, like everything in the Netherlands, but So it has to constantly pump out water. And so we made this whole scheme in which the industry's rest heats from essentially cooking calcium, the process of making cement, could be used to then start heating the houses by heating the water that had to be pumped out. We kind of created a kind of a whole landscape battery. And based on that, the transformation of the industrial site. So there's also, so it's really, again here, this kind of linking of man-made stuff, nature, energy consumption, but because everything is makeable at this moment and was makeable, we could kind of engineer the whole thing and create currently. So underneath where you see in the middle here are 2 development lots, in which kind of from small scale to larger scale developments will take place, and they'll all be heated with essentially the rest of industry and the water pumped out of the quarry. But yeah, in a scheme like this, the windmills are vetoed, they're out, but a lot of the other stuff was built. I'll go through these quick because there's a lot of projects in which we were kind of doing subtle micro topographies, like figuring out with the excavators on site, like if you can do big stuff, can we also do kind of smaller stuff, giving them again CNC milled. So this is a CNC mill of a piece of actual stone. But the excavators, they were actually also working with CNC coordinates, but then topographical coordinates. So it was pretty much the same process. We just sent the coordinates to the excavators and they exactly digged out the whole site, which kind of created these more human scaled sizes as a contrast to the super large industrial size. So that gives a kind of a sense of excitement while moving through the site. So this is what recently was finished, which again also guides water for the site, and the vegetation is a thing that we can't plant anything here. Everything has to emerge ecologically, so that sometimes is a bit disappointing because then you have to wait 30 years. But nonetheless, that's the rules of the game here. And lastly, we're now kind of, so one thing that happened, which was on the one hand a pity and also nice, so the industry was actually going to stay here and have this kind of mutual coexistence with the natural reservation on the other side. But in the meantime, they've pulled the plug, so they're closing, and now actually there's a whole new assignment in transforming the whole industrial site, of which there is, again, this whole discussion now about when the initial contracts were signed, the neighborhood insisted, out of a kind of like a vengeful act, that a lot of the oven stuff had to be demolished. Or I think it wasn't actually really about demolishing it, but it had to be closed. Now, when push comes to shove, everybody's kind of saying, hey, it's kind of that's too bad if we demolish all the well, specifically some of the buildings. So we're currently in the process with also the state architect of the Netherlands, etc., to kind of select which buildings are worthwhile. And there's really magnificent structures here. And kind of weird, ominous spaces, which are extremely hard to redevelop, but at the same time have this kind of obvious spatial quality, which everybody is now recognizing. However, they've all signed a contract in which you have to demolish it. So we're now really trying to figure out again how we can keep certain parts of the project, but nobody knew that they were going to leave. So this is the like ongoing work on how to make the kind of the industrial site more public by transecting it with a park in which part of the demolition, some stuff has to be demolished, is kind of turned into this kind of landscape wherein the kind of the process of cement production, but also of the site's demolition and reconstruction is kind of made tangible in this landscape where. So these kind of, again, processes that are on site become tangible, both ecological but also industrial, with certain remnants kind of selected to stay on site, because not everything is, we can't save everything, but we're kind of negotiating what's feasible. So I mean, that's the project. It's so as we said, there's a lot of facts I could talk on for hours and hours, but I think it's better to kind of to point out that this project is really interesting because it's not so negative in terms of it is an absolute industrial exploitation landscape, but which does not have the ramification that it usually has in the context of economic kind of analysis or internationally, in which industry wins and the rest loses. In this case, it has been an extremely beneficial relationship, which wasn't always visible. And I think a very interesting role for us as architects was extremely grateful work to do, because on the one hand, it was like, modeling at a scale which we'll probably never do after this project again. So that's the nostalgic part already. And at the same time, it also revealed how through visualizations, how through design, you can actually get people who are like one of the largest concrete manufacturers, a neighborhood group, and kind of a nature conservancy group, plus to sign a contract to build this site together. I think that was partially not, it's not all thanks to architects and design, blah, blah, blah. But we had a very, I think, good role within that process, which we also continue to try to have in other projects, because this obviously gave us a lot of confidence that you can have an influence, beneficial influence in complex sites and issues.
Thank you very much, Christopher de Vries. That was a really exciting presentation. I'm really very curious to see how it will develop. I will definitely keep an eye on it and see how it develops in the next decade or so.
Yeah, that's the timeline. Definitely, it's decades now.
Yeah. You have to think at a different time scale and do wrestle your way back in again and again.
Yeah, we got kicked out lately again, so we're wrestling ourselves back in.
As the next speaker, I'd like to introduce Kyosuk Lee, Senior Associate of MVRDV Rotterdam, who will talk about Solo 7017 Sky Garden in Seoul. I think you are in Korea right now. Is that correct? What time is it in Korea?
It's 2 a.m.
I'm so sorry. I'm so grateful that you're still here. Thank you so much. But let me introduce you. Kyosuk Lee is an urbanist and an architect, and he leads projects for MVRDV's Asia studio. Since joining the firm in 2009, he has realized a variety of projects, among these the Sky Garden in Seoul and the Tianjin Binhai Public Library in China. He's currently overseeing the construction completion of Paradise City Entertainment Development and the Tancheon Waterfront Development in Seoul and a folly structure in Gwangju in South Korea. Before he joined MVRDV, Lee graduated as an architect from the Berlage Institute in Rotterdam in 2008 and worked as a researcher with Urban Think Tank in Venezuela. In the exhibition Land for Us All, we're showing this project, the Solo 7017 Sky Garden, alongside the uncovering of the Changyechan stream as two examples in one city that radically deals with traffic infrastructures of the 70s. I think that almost seems impossible for us here in Vienna, where streets and parking spaces seem to be more sacrosanct than churches have ever been. Kyosuk Lee, the online stream is all yours. We're very curious to hear about the project.
Oh, thank you for the information, the introduction. I will share the screen. Do you see the screen? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very happy to share our experience in the Solo project. Project located in Seoul. You see the satellite map of the Seoul, 10 million population, but including surrounding cities, 28 million population. You see the green space, that's only the mountain. So the city is lacking quite some green public space. That's how this project is relevant with the subject of the discussion today. The bridge was built in 1970s. It is one of the first the bridge for the car. As you could see the skyline behind with the construction of the high-rise tower, this was kind of the symbol of the Korean modernization of the time. In the 1980, this is one of my favorite photos to show the project. This is the moment that the democratization movement happened in the location. So this is the first time the people conquer the highway. they were on top, was a very three-dimensional, let's say, the movement was there. And then this was the situation 2015, the no pedestrian lane is added. Korea, as you might imagine, is a strong car manufacturing country with the Hyundai and Kia Motors. The pedestrian doesn't have a space to stay in the city. And then 2013, after the 43 years servicing as the car bridge, it failed to function as a car traffic bridge anymore from the 2015. So government's supposed to decide what to do next. And the people usually say, yes, we need to demolish and the new car bridge needed. And then at the same time, there's also growing voice in Korea, probably no more car bridge. We might use this chance to make the, let's say, new idea as a pedestrian bridge. At the same time, all the statistics show that Korea is too much for the car. You see that the Korean death rate by the car accident is dramatically high. And at the same time, because of this, the 10 million population, car addicted city has a lot of the pollution issue growing in the last decade. So then the mayor decide, okay, let's use this bridge for the pedestrian connection and let's detour the car. That's the orange color, you see that? That's the detour route. And then there was quite a political discussion happened. What is more important for the city? If the car goes along with the orange route, they might spend 3 minutes more on the car. But if we change the bridge for the pedestrian, pedestrian might save the 20 minutes to go from the one side to the other side. And then mayor made a decision, okay, for this project, let's have the pedestrian connection. So 2015, there was an international competition. This is the situation of the bridge. You see that the east and the west is completely divided by the train station and the huge infrastructure. It is one of the most important traffic road in Seoul. MBIDB was not only focusing on the landscape design of the park, but we see the thing different way. So we thought about what if the bridge is just the starting point of the, let's say, three-dimensional network of the pedestrian route of the site. So we started to add the branch going through the expanding through the neighbor. So we expect that ultimately this let's say like a bridge becoming like a tree who make the green and the pedestrian network around the area. So that was the, let's say, winning entry. And then after winning the competition, we encounter quite some structure like a constraint because this bridge was not stable enough. So only possible way to grow the plant is either we apply only 10 centimeter soil with 100% coverage. In this case, you make a basically golf course without any tree. So how to use this amount of soil for the let's say the new park on top of the bridge. So what we did is we squeezed this amount of soil to the 10% of the coverage, and then we use that as a tree pot. This is a way that we might have a more diverse plant into the project. So it was a very challenging detail to put everything very light. So structure is only 26 centimeter. That includes all the electronic connection and the drainage and the automatic water supply. That was how it is made. And the the tree was also tied it in strong way than usual because it could fall down to the traffic below. And this project has another hidden ambition that this project has a kind of experimental field that how many kind of the plant could survive in this harsh environment. So we could not choose the only one or two plants for this garden. We thought, okay, let's try to have as much as possible. So what we did is we bring like 230 species who could survive in Korean climate, in Seoul climate, and we organize it according to the Korean alphabet order. This means that if you enter from the east side to the west side, basically you walk over the, let's say, plant library of the Seoul. This is, for instance, this is zoom in of the drawing. You organize that according to the order, and then you grouped by the let's say, the family of the species. And then this is a way that we contain the plant in the tree part. We indicate the name, and of course it has a very important let's say educational purpose. As you could see that each area has a certain environment. This is kind of the bamboo zone. The people, one of the popular zone, and then some of the plant need the different treatment for the like water lily. Also, pine tree is one of the favorite one in Seoul, and even some almost like a forest kind of the configuration could be made with this method. We don't only want to make this bridge as a park, we also want to make this as a street. So we try to add many different activities. So use the shape of the tree part, we add a cafe and some cafes to have it to put on the bridge. So we add extra structure, and we make the stair to the loop. And from the loop, you see the overview of the bridge and the city. And then some of the tree part open as a theater to provide some like, performance in the weekend. Some plant is more for the cooling down in the summer. Some of the tree part is made for the children to shout and to enjoy in the air. And also we preserve some part of the old structure, also to look down to the street. And then a connection is a very important part of the project. You see that like a tree-like the shape extended, also connected to ground level by escalator and the lift, another lift. And we also extend the bridge to the ground level. So bridge get even longer in the connection. And then we add extra branches to the neighbor who doesn't have a connection to the center. And you could see that how we carefully locate the stair to match with the street nearby. And you see that also how we match. And then we also try to connect some of the tower nearby. So this is a view from the commercial space of the podium part of the tower to connect the bridge project. And in terms of the lighting, Seoul is full of this kind of the rainbow color. And we don't want to repeat the same way. We want to make the very calm lighting. The blue was a very good background of the activity happening on top of the bridge. So it makes quite a calm contrast with the surrounding. 2017, when this project was finished, people concerned a lot. They say, no, not. They say it's 70% of the tree will die in 2 years because it's harsh. You don't have enough soil. That's why we have a photograph project to prove that they could surely survive. So this is the photograph taken in the same viewpoint 2 years later. So most of the tree, 98%, is to survive in the very good way. So this is the one of the view in the opening day. And this is the way that is survived 2 years later. It's not only the tree grows, but also the business, small business around the bridge is also growing. This is also very important aspect of the project. We are now doing the Solo 2.0. Basically, the Solo project is a completely top-down project because it's owned by the government. It's 100% funded by the government. But from 2.0, we try to do different things. We make the extension of the pedestrian network to the surrounding, and we appoint the street architect, local young architect. We take care of each of the connection. So we appoint the 10 young architects, and they discuss with the local resident how to develop this network further. So, for instance, we make some collage to explain how to develop this network. This is like a community office, almost like abandoned building. When the network continue, green and the pedestrian flow could continue. And of course, some of the private business could also contribute in the more kind way to the visitors. And then many of the, let's say, gated housing complexes could have also try their effort to join this connection. And then in the city center, there are still some urban factory that bring quite some character of this area. So we also suggest it's not only the production area, we try to also show the product they made on the street to the visitors. This is also one of the projects, the highway toll gate could be also changed to the pedestrian connection from one to the other side. So this is our expectation. 2015, it was on the car bridge, and step by step, it provoked the urban regeneration of the surrounding area, and we make the surrounding area more green and dense and more pedestrian oriented with a vibrant urban activity. I have a short movie to show since because of the pandemic situation, not every one of you could visit the project. Let me try. This is the movie from the sky. You see that we are entering from the Korean alphabet order, the Ga zone, and this is already extended part of the bridge. You are marching toward the city center. You see that the central station building there, and then you see already the connection to the office building and hotel building surrounding. And then this is like a 50-meter wide, huge street that has 12 the zebra. And you go over, and then there's a major traffic lane, the train lane, and you go over, and there's some plaza before they get bifurcated the 4 different the neighborhood. And then we also transform one of the plaza, the ground level, with a pedestrian-friendly plaza with the potential pedestrian activity happen. This was what I prepared as a short introduction for the Solo project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And I really hope that one day I will be able to visit this project. One day it will be possible again. So we will jump to our 4th and last speaker today. The only participant from Austria, but from the very far end of the country, from the west of the country. Let me introduce Martin Strehle to you. He is a founding member, associate and managing director of Kairos Mobilitäts- und Kommunikationslösungen, as well as director of Kairos Institute for Impact Research and Development. which is a non-profit association with the aim of creating and implementing prototypes for sustainable development. The focus is on rural and regional development in Europe, West and Central Africa, as well as Southeast Asia. Both institutes are based in Vorarlberg in the west of Austria. He holds a master's degree on sustainable agriculture and rural development from University of Applied Life Sciences in Vienna, and a diploma on rural development from the Center for Rural Development at the Humboldt University in Berlin in Germany. But he's here today as a founder and chairman of the NGO Bodenfreiheit, or Land Freedom, which is a bottom-up movement of citizens that are worried about the loss of land in one of the densest areas of the country. Martin, please let us hear about what your NGO has been up to recently.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. These were all awesome projects now that we've already seen, and I'm really humbled to present a very small-scale project, a small citizen initiative in the westernmost state of Vorarlberg. I also prepared some few slides that I'm going to share with you. Our association was founded 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, and the base behind, or the founding idea was the experience that within not even 2 generations, the whole state of Vorarlberg changed completely from a very rural, farming-based environment to, we call it rural sprawl. It's not an urban sprawl, it's a rural sprawl. Our cities, but also our small villages were spread toward, among all of the flat areas in our habitable lands. And for the past 25 years or 20 years, this development was even sped up significantly. And this was all happening even though in the early 70s, the zoning was introduced in our state government. So beginning with the 70s, our officials tried to plan the inhabitable areas, but even though they did that, our zoning plans presently look like this. We have basically only building sites, except for very few green spots that our zoning plan shows. And unfortunately, these green spots are mostly due to, for example, state highways that are now accompanied with open zoned land, and all the rest of the flat land is basically zoned as building sites. And even though in the 70s they zoned a lot of land, up until now, more than 30% of the zoned land is not utilized. It's still open land. It looks like open land, but in the zoning plan, it is a designated building area. And for the past 15 years, we experienced a fleeing spread from coming from the capital markets, going into land markets. And this results in a complete full stop of mobility in the market of land. And that means people retain their zoned land because the prices of zoned land are increasing annually by approximately 20%. So nobody is selling the zoned land, and that means officials need to zone even more land, even though we have 30% of zoned land that is not utilized up until now. This all results in the fact that if we would use only the zoned land that is not utilized up until now for farming, we could produce 0.5 kilogram of potatoes for each and everybody living in Vorarlberg each and every day per year. So we just showcase these examples to tell people that our open lands that are even zoned would have a much larger value for even food production of our communities. Our strategies now, the strategies of Bodenfreiheit, our small association with only 300 members, is that we crowdfund 4 different activities. Each and every member pays 10 euros per month, 120 euros per year. And with this money, we try to do a sort of paradox intervention. We acquire important plots of land to keep them free and accessible for the communities. We also acquire rights on plots, for example, way leaves on larger plots to secure them for farming. And of course, the plots that we acquire, we need to utilize them. We need to do something with them. And the 4th strategy is we try to do large-scale communication campaigns and campaigning to show people that the effect of the past 2 generations are enormous and threatening, and we all need to do something to change that. And I'll just come up with a few pictures to show you the 4 different strategies that we use. For example, the acquisition of plots. That sounds very funny with 300 people paying 10 euros per month. You cannot buy large plots of land. So on the left bottom corner, you see a very small and narrow plot of land, 1628 by 8. That's 1.2 meters wide and 40 meters long, a very, very small plot of land. And we were able, for example, to acquire this one. And by acquiring this plot, we, for example, block the access to a large area that by our small plot, we secure as open spaces. And of course, not only acquiring is important, but showcase or showing people the importance of keeping these plots open or even larger plots open. You see, for example, the view to the Lake of Constance is, of course, presently blocked by our small plot of land. And quite recently, for example, 2 weeks ago, that was 2 weeks ago, we started to plant biodiversity plots on our plots of land and on additional plots that we were given way leaves in the surrounding areas. So we work there with schools, with school kids, educating them about biodiversity and working on the spot and doing something concrete and not just talking about it. The second strategy of way leaves, this blue plot of land that is marked on that map shows one threatened farmland in Ludesch, that's in the center of Vorarlberg. The surrounding area is already utilized by Red Bull and Rauch, 2 of the most famous companies in our state that in our point of view, do not really produce the most important products that we would be proud of 50 years from now. And the pressure on the farmers and on the people owning the land here is very high. So we buy way leaves from these people that are registered in the land registry. And these way leaves will secure in the long run the farming on these areas. Even if they sell the land registry shows that we have a way leaf there and nobody's allowed to build there. We also do a bit of campaigning. We gather or bring together different associations, form groups that try to put pressure on the political decision makers to work more towards keeping land open. And we support small initiatives in different areas. For example, this is in Weiler, where a big bakery company wanted to build on 4.5 hectares a single-story bread company or industry. And there we supported them to gather people to make things open, bring people out in the fields, showcase the size of the plants that they have in these areas. And this, for example, completely changed the picture and made that company, the bakery company, move towards an already zoned land and building a 3-story bakery industry building that is opened in a few weeks. This was a very brief input on what we do. We have a webpage, www.bodenfreiheit.at, that you are welcome to visit, and I hope you have some questions or comments on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you to everybody for a round of fantastic presentations. I have to say, I'm really happy that we managed to organize today's events, and really the coronavirus is at fault here, because we were supposed to finish the exhibition already in a couple of days, but we then, because we had so many weeks that we had to stay closed, we prolonged the time for it. So we had the opportunity to also come up with one more event in this series. And I think it really shows that it's such an important thing to not just point out the problems that we have with land use, with planning, etc., but to also show that and inspire with good projects in that respect. So thank you again for all of you. For the audience, now would be a great opportunity. If you have any questions to each of us, any questions specifically about a project, please just put them into the chat and I'll be able to read them out. But I've prepared a few short questions. We won't keep this long because we're all kind of sick of Zoom, aren't we? But it would be nice now that I all have you online. I'm quite interested to ask you whether this escalating use of land and the increase in sealed surface is a topic at all in your respective country. I mean, we know from Martin's lecture that it is. I know a little bit from Switzerland that it is a problem. It's a very similar situation in Switzerland as it is in Austria, small country, many mountains, a lot of people. But what does it look like? What does it look like in Switzerland? But what does it look like in Korea, for example, or in the Netherlands?
Who should answer first? Korea first, Netherlands second? Or
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Netherlands first, then Switzerland, then Korea, because I saw that Vedrana also wants to say something.
Well, in the Netherlands, it's actually, I would say we're quite acknowledging, or have acknowledged this issue already, I would say a decade or two ago, in the sense is that cities like Rotterdam specifically became extremely renowned for their kind of excessive paving of the whole city. And they've been actually very actively undoing that. And I think kind of around, also because of the kind of very obvious water issues in the Netherlands, this is quite advanced in planning. So we're now doing an urban plan for 4,000 houses, in which this is just mandatory, that you have quite a lot of open kind of green space and specifically like water management levels that require green. Yeah, so I think it was a problem, but that we're like very well en route to making it much less of a problem. So I think that's a more kind of optimistic note from the from the Netherlands at the moment.
Right. So what I could say is that such initiative that is or the strategy of not zoning new land is already in action. Like there is actually a regulation in Switzerland where that doesn't allow municipality to zone new land for building. That is a positive thing. The other problem that arises, and it's becoming stronger and stronger, is actually that the land that remained for building is very expensive. Due to that it also becomes like a speculation object. And that's the problem that we have in the cities, and where projects like ours basically don't have a chance on the free market, because we can't afford buying a land. So we are kind of, such initiatives are very strongly connected to different players, like whether they are the cities or other institutions that are basically have land or are able to buy land and then lease it to smaller initiatives like us with a interest rate that we can afford.
I continue the Korean case. I think the most of the Korea is still growing society in terms of the new town. Many of the new town is planned with the consideration of the many of the issues that we are discussing. So there are many regulations and the guideline applied for that matter. But problem is city center. Like as I show in the very first slide of my presentation, the city of the Seoul is completely covered by the concrete. City government tried to do several things. First of all, the green roof is one of the things they do, like also our project. And then they give the incentive for the project who provide more open soil, the land, to the garden, to the surrounding. This also related with the microclimate issue of the city center. We didn't see yet how situation get improved the last 10 years effort, but I hope they have a plan for the next 20 years or 30 years. We will see how it will improve the situation.
And your project, as you showed, the next stages, they will contribute a lot to the greening of the city center. If you put it like that. I see. Let me read out a comment from the chat. It's more of a comment, not a question. It says from Jakob S, maybe there is an opportunity to make the exhibition kind of permanent, maybe outside the AZW, but within the MQ area, or maybe even as a moving installation through Austria. Because Bewusstseinsbildung, so consciousness building in Austrian municipalities is one of the most important things to make locals aware, like Bodenfreiheit does in Vorarlberg. I can answer that actually, because we are turning our exhibition right now into a traveling exhibition. We've spent the last 2 weeks packing it up. It will be picked up on Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it will start traveling through Austria for 2 years, which is a nice thing, of course.
One more comment in relationship to Martin's, I think, because I just said this kind of optimistic thing about the Netherlands, but then I was thinking about Martin's presentation, and that is much more pertains to cities. And actually, when you look into the hinterland, it is specifically the logistical sector and the growth of the logistical sector that is really paving over. And I think because they don't get any architectural consideration, because it's just seen as kind of necessary evil in order to get our packages quickly, I think there's very little engagement from our field with that type of development. And I think that Martin's kind of efforts that they had a stack and essentially, you know, use 3 times as little floor space because of the kind of your action is something which is a result. And I think results like that could be much more pervasive if people get involved in this kind of uninteresting theme, and for architects that want to get involved in these ugly buildings. But it's not only architects, I think everybody, like community organizations, etc., to address this, because if anyone's paving over land, it's the logistical sector, I think, at the moment.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it was quite shocking to see these 2 images, this very, very nice view of the valley with a lot of green space, very few houses, quite untouched. And then to see this in huge shed, especially this huge parking around it.
Doesn't look like a bakery at all.
No, not at all. It did actually look like an Amazon headquarters, no, not headquarters, but a logistics hub. Yes, that's absolutely true. I would like to now ask you, because 3 of the 4 projects that we've shown today, they're actually what you would call bottom-up projects. So they were started from, or at least not from the side of the government, but from the civil society, or from a group of people who were looking for affordable space to live, or from 2 young architects that wanted to contribute towards shaping an area that they grew up in. so none of this would have happened in this way without your engagement as part of the critical public or critical professionals. Is that something that's very important to your role as a member of the public or as architects? I think that's something that I have a different question for you, Kosciuszko, because your project is not so much a bottom-up project, but the other way around. But I would like Martin, Christopher, and Vedrana to answer that.
I think personally that it's very important to mobilize civil society to get into a more long-term perspective, because for the past decades we were given bread and games. We earned a lot of money by selling land, and we have our jobs, and we all believe in this myth of growth, continuous growth. And at the same time, we all realize that we approach a boundary here very soon. And I think the rural areas, and that's, thank you, Christopher, for mentioning that, the rural areas are predominantly neglected presently, and that would be something that your exhibition should also tackle, moving towards the rural areas and not only into the cities where the students and the architects and the spatial planners live, but also moving out where the people live in their single flats or family homes, and contribute towards the sprawl. And at the same time, at the restaurant table, complaining about the loss of open spaces, and not realizing that they are a big part of the problem.
Okay, and so I think, well, when we started our project, we saw it more as an opportunity. Well, we had an idea and we were not so much ideological about it at that time. I think we were very much really just interested in how is it possible to stay in the city and to make such a project where we could live together or create a community. And I think in our case, we really became more aware of what are we actually doing by doing it. And just now we are mature enough that we can be part of the discourse, and we understand that what we did was actually interesting, and that it is something with this project we now here in the city we can be part of a lot of discussion. And I think we actually moved and inspired others to do similar. There are different areas in Basel that are being developed in a similar way. So I'm kind of proud of that, but I have to say that in the beginning it was really not so much intentional. It was kind of what grew out of just thinking rationally about what do we need, why do we want that, and it was we really tried to design the whole process for the people that they see it as an opportunity, and not so much as a creative group of people that think that they are fighting something like an evil thing. And that was good because the culture that we developed, it is very easygoing and at the same time effective in a way.
Yeah. So I think from our perspective, it's a bit nuanced, because I think because we can visualize stuff at various scales, and we can make our influence very effectively look very big. So that has, like, architects have this, I would say, predilection to kind of overestimate their influence, and at the same time, there is this interesting way that we do have these mechanisms. So I more see us as kind of as players in this game, which have an interesting tool at our disposal, which you just actually kind of start processes and kind of guide it. And when I said, like, we have to wrestle ourselves in, that's really the case. Like, we're not evidence partners all the time. And then sometimes we get a commission in which something that we maybe thought of, that stair, we thought of, that was exactly positioned there 8 years before we got the commission. But then it was like, hey, we have this idea. We want to build a stair here. And we were like, oh, really? Oh, well, what a good idea. And then you could claim that it was your idea, but maybe it's just evident. And I think it's not really about that. I think it's much more about participating, knowing what you have at your disposal, and then just being a conscious player in this game and kind of starting up these dynamics. And ultimately, you know, obviously hope that you were as influential as possible, at least kind of keep playing and trying to have influence. But you know, in our case, it's so messy, it would be hard to kind of claim causal relationship between what we did and what happened.
But still, you took part in it, and that's also, yeah, you took
Yeah.
part in it without being able to claim the complete authorship, which is a
which is also
good thing to do.
Yeah, because there's so many people involved. So it would also be, I think it would be arrogant to kind of claim that because we sent in those drawings, you know, there were a lot of people already kind of, you know, thinking about this hole in the wall, in the mountain, but we still do it a lot. And then, you know, the process starts, and sometimes it works, and more often it doesn't.
That brings me, there's one question in the chat, which also brings me to my next question, which is going to be the last question, because we're going to let Kosciuszko get a rest. It's probably 3 o'clock now. The question is from Lena Tega, asking, do you think that the amount of streets in cities should be decreased in order to allow more safe spaces for passengers and cyclists, equaling in a better economy for local shops and cleaner air? But I'll connect that directly to my question, which is, we found it extremely interesting in our research that the Seulo Sky Garden was not a bottom-up project, it was a top-down project initiated by the city administration, or more precisely by the mayor, as you mentioned. And if you imagine this project in Vienna, it would be completely inconceivable to say, we don't need this inner city motorway anymore, let's just close it. I think then you would really see what civil society can do to stop a project. This is what we should learn from, really.
Yeah.
So what was his motivation? What was the motivation of the city administration, and how did it go down in public? Were there any negative responses to it?
Let's put it in the financial point of view. Project cost 50 million euro, relatively small. If government city make the museum in some area in the city center, it usually costs 200 million euro, but that cover like the 100 meter by 100 meter site, and the effect is very limited. Probably some area around might be affected by the new building, but the bridge this bridge is like a kilometer length, and then the area that affected by the project is much more than what we do when the investment is focusing on only one point. I think the mayor already knew that when they suggested this project. So in Seoul, there are more and more kind of the linear project that has it's not only the Cheonggyecheon River project, of course, is one of the example, and this one, and then we also have a Korean low line project in the city center. So the physical aspect of the project also affects the range of the, let's say, good, let's say, the effect from the project. And then I think it's interesting also to mention about the speed, like issue, like it took only 2 years from the decision from the mayor to be completed and open to the public. But I'm also living in the Netherlands. I could imagine if it happened in the Western European country, including the Austria, it might take the decade. But it could be done more, let's say, democratic way, with a much more involvement that we could imagine. But I think the what is very interesting case of the Seoul law is that the government used this project in very almost like a military operation way, top down in 2 years, to provoke the surrounding areas to bottom up project. So this how to coordinate this interface between the top down, let's say, dictation to bring the surrounding reaction more in the interesting way. That's the I think that's the beauty of the coordination from the city government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very intelligent decision, and one can only hope that other city administrations learn from that.
Yeah, of course that there. Yeah, I remember when we were on the construction, people complain a lot. When I take the car, the taxi to the construction site, taxi driver doesn't know I'm working on the site. He complained, this will delay the 2 hours of the traffic every day. But city is already full of the traffic jam. Changing this to the pedestrian doesn't really make the visible increase of the traffic hours. But for pedestrian, the effect was very strong. I think the city invested 50 million euro, but some of the property who has a bridge connection to our project get much more property value increase by doing that. Of course, then we need to be careful about the gentrification of the surrounding area. That's why city is trying to organize the urban regeneration in the more coordinated way. But it's happening more often first in Singapore and Korea. It's one of the 2 places going forward in Asia. And I see that after this project, many cities in China or Southeast Asia also try to have an interest to do this kind of operation in coming years.
Very interesting. I do hope that I'll be able to visit it one day. But I would like to again take the opportunity to thank you all for your great talks. It was great to have you all here from all over the world. Yes, and I'll let you get on with your evenings or your nights in Korea. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very, very grateful for this, and it has been a really inspiring evening for me.
Thank you, Caroline, for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.